Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were four little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Miss Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an incident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Have you ever been told not to do something by your parent? Why do you think? Then old Miss Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were good little bunnies. Went down the lane to gather blackberries, but Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed right under the gate. Have you ever done something that you were not supposed to do? First, he ate some lettuce, and then after that some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and he felt sick. He went to look for some parsley, but round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages, but he jumped out and ran after Peter, waving his rake, calling out, "Stop, thief!" What should Peter do? Peter was most dreadfully frightened, and he rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on his 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately run under a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, and his sobs were overheard by some very friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Have you ever wanted to give up? Why did you? Mr. McGregor came up with a scythe which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. What do you think happens next? Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden under a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking underneath each and every one. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Achoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to put up his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of the window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was too tired from running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not least an idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in the can. How do you think Peter will escape? After time, he began to wander about, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the store doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her families in the wood. Peter asked her why her way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans, and White Cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it was alive. Peter thought it would be best to go away without speaking to her. He has heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Would you have asked the cat for help? He went back towards the tool shed, but he suddenly came quite close to him, and he heard a noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped on over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go. Along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes, Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner. But Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what had he done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fur night. I am sorry to say Peter was not very well during that evening. Why do you think he felt sick? His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave him a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon should be taken to bed. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk blackberries for supper. Do you think Peter should have been punished?